Welcome to our summer series of work and play. This is the first episode, and we are talking about what your perception of rest is and how you got it, and a little bit about your nervous system and why it does not feel like it can rest. Welcome to Burnout Solutions. My name is Mona Tippett. I am a registered nurse, a life coach, an emotional resiliency expert, and a mom. I love to help healthcare workers and caretakers and just busy, capable people understand their brain and nervous system so stress, overwhelm, and frustration do not run their life. Here on this podcast, we break down burnout, emotional overload, and survival patterns in simple human language. I love to give you practical ways to feel safer, calmer, and more present in your everyday life. You do not need fixing. What you need is support and a nervous system that knows that it's safe. Thanks for being here. Hello, and welcome back to Burnout Solutions. I'm very glad that you're here today. I am been reading a lot and thinking a lot and had some life experiences recently that have just started me thinking a lot about working and about playing. And with the summer coming up, I thought I would love to do an episode series about work versus play and what brings us meaning in life and what helps us be intentional in both of these areas, and really how we spend our time and make our time in our life the best, whether we're working or we're playing. And that's kind of the backbone of the series that we're doing. I'm talking about rest, I'm talking about play, I'm talking about vacation, I'm talking about leisure. And today I wanted to talk about rest. And that's what I wanted to start today, is why high achievers can confuse exhaustion with their identity and what that could be costing them, and maybe what stories we were told about rest. And I want you to ask yourself, when was the last time that you rested, like truly felt rested, not just laying on the couch, not just zoned out in front of something on the TV, not really falling asleep because you're so exhausted. I mean, genuinely, intentionally, you felt rested. And not only did you feel rested, but you didn't feel guilty resting. For a lot of you, that question might be a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe you're getting a little bit defensive. Maybe you're already in your head listing all the reasons why you can't rest, like your patients need you, your students need you, you have a lot of emails in your inbox, you have kids and their activities. It's May right now, and there's so many things that are competing for my time and attention right now. I have a senior who's graduating from high school, and all my kids are in activities, and my oldest just left and is working on his own. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I also have projects, and it's time to start gardening. We live on 2 acres, and a big, big garden is something that we do. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But a lot of us just have obligations that never seem to end, right? And I get it because I'm living it, right? And I have been you. I have stood in that place where rest felt like it was a luxury that I didn't get to experience. It also was something that I had to earn. And I often do, and I have to stop myself, but I often did and sometimes feel like I needed to be moving and doing something to feel worthwhile, right? If I'm watching a show, I'm folding my laundry. Might as well be doing something while you're doing nothing. And so that's kind of what I want to explore today, is if that is the feeling that you have, I want you to know that, and I think you know deep down, or I hope you do, that your worth is not attached to your to-do list, your what I did list, how productive you were. And I think that that is a story that was handed down from generations, perhaps. And I see this so many times with high achievers. I see this so many times with healthcare workers. We love helping people, and that could be because it was modeled to us. And I think that's why so many brilliant, driven, compassionate people are running on empty. Those super strivers, those high achievers just feel like they give and give and give, and they don't give enough to themselves. So we're starting today talking about rest, like I said, and why maybe your story could use some changing. I want you to think about the adults that you had in your life when you were growing up, the ones that you admired, the ones that were around you, the ones that maybe you wanted to be like, and ask yourself, were they resting? Were they working? Because for so many of us, those, especially those drawn to the helping profession, to leadership, to achievement, those models were people who never stopped. So I was raised on a dairy farm. My dad worked with his father on a dairy farm of about 40 to 50 cows. They together worked to provide the feed for these cows. So they had alfalfa, they were growing corn, they were growing barley, wheat, we had oat hay, just all the crops. We also had a really large garden, and I'm one of 8 children. My grandparents lived next door to us, so the farm was just right next door. My dad would get up at 4 a.m. and he would milk the cows. And as children, our job was to get up and go and feed the calves, right? The motto was, we ate after the animals were fed. So I got up at, 5, 6 o'clock, would go and feed the calves and then go to school. And then when we got home, we had to go and do our chores and feed the calves again. And then during the summers, we helped with the alfalfa. We did irrigating. We raked hay and baled hay and stacked hay. I bucked bales when I was really, really young. And that was just what we did. Working was just what we did. My mom also cooked all of our meals. She canned. She worked in the garden. We had just a huge garden, and that was what fed us and our cows. So for me, working nonstop was what was modeled to me. When I saw my dad resting in air quotes, my dad was either reading the newspaper or watching TV. I didn't see him do hobbies. I didn't see him vacation. We rarely went on vacation. It's really hard to find a substitute to milk cows twice a day. So for me, growing up was just, we worked. I also came from ancestors who worked really hard. And my ancestors actually settled the area that I grew up in. And they came from different countries and they crossed the plains, some of them on hand carts. And I just had this impression that as a Johnson, we worked hard without complaint. And I find that mentality pretty typical from people who were raised as a farmer, but also people who are in healthcare. They were often modeled how to work hard. And this working hard was called dedication. And so we watched them, and then we learned that maybe rest is for the weak, that being busy is better, that if you are not producing, then you're falling behind. If you are not excelling, then you are mediocre, and mediocre is not good enough. And that people who push through were the ones that we admire. Now, again, this is not anybody's fault. This is people just doing their best that they knew how, living the values that they were given. And I think that somehow along those lines, those values got encoded in us. And for high achievers, they got turbocharged by a system that actively rewards overworking, right? We got the straight A's. We were the ones who studied really hard and excelled in all areas. And in America and in many Western countries, there's an old story rooted in what some people call like a Protestant work ethic, or in my growing up, just a farmer culture, a pioneer culture, and the idea that hard work is a moral good, and that productivity equals virtue, and that if you're tired, that's proof that you're doing something right. And in medicine and in healthcare, I saw that even more. My first job was labor and delivery, and it was at a teaching hospital. And I would see these residents who would just work their tails off and be there for hours, 30-hour shifts, 36-hour shifts. They would sometimes just talk, okay, when was the last time you worked nonstop? Did you get a nap? Sometimes they would try and one up each other. Oh yeah, well, one night I did this and then I had all these patients. They were not told that they were crazy. Medical training has changed a little bit, thank goodness. And now they actually have a cap on how many hours you can work, because they have seen, yes, it's not safe to go that long without resting. I was also mentored by nurses who never took a lunch break and wore it like a badge. They would look down on the other floors that could actually sit down and have breakfast or actually had a real lunch break, because in labor and delivery, we didn't do that. And we called it dedication. We called it passion, but it really wasn't. And then as we saw this modeled to us, then we internalized it and it became part of our story. And so we repeated that. And we didn't need anyone to tell us that anymore, because we believed it. I'll sleep when I'm dead. I can handle this. Somebody else needs me more. And I want you to know that the exhaustion that you're carrying is not evidence that you're good at your job. It is not evidence that you care more than other people, and it's not really a badge of honor, but it's evidence that you have been living inside a story that actually was never true. And today, I just want to question that just a little bit. So I was thinking about this because my oldest son just got his first job out of college. He worked during high school. He worked really hard. He's a hard worker. And now he just moved to Texas, and he is working 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours every single day. And then he has a day off. And he's been doing that for 3 weeks now. And he is totally dedicated. He loves it. I called him the other day. It was 8:30 his time, and he was already in bed because he has to just sleep and get up early and get his food made for the day so that he can work a 12-hour shift. And he doesn't know really anyone there. But I have just been thinking a lot about him, about this career, and how working all the time is the perfect setup for burnout. I don't know that he's trying to grow other parts of his life right now. And again, his first job out of college. And we'll see how it goes. But as I've thought about him and his work ethic, I can see where I have modeled maybe not the healthiest attitude when it comes to working. So I have told him several times, I said, remember, some people are so poor that all they have is money. And he does not appreciate that or see the wisdom in it yet. But I think in time he will. So as I've been thinking about this career for him, I just see exhaustion and, for good or bad, the generational patterns that I have passed down to him, and how working so hard that you're just exhausted is just not a healthy thing. So I wanted to transition into talking about what does energy and arousal and stress and rest look like from a nervous system standpoint. Let's just review. So remember, your nervous system is always running in the background of your life. Every single second, every single day, its program has one job, and that is to assess safety or danger for us. Are you safe right now, or are you in danger? And what we want to be more often than not is in our ventral vagal state, or in our optimal zone. And remember, this state, we are safe, connected, we feel calm, present, curious, you can think clearly, you can connect with other people and engage in the world around you. And then there's two different states: the sympathetic state, fight or flight response, when your nervous system perceives a threat. And this is even non-physical, like a difficult patient, an overflowing inbox, a text from a coworker or a patient or a parent late at night. And from something outside of us, our body mobilizes and has an increase of energy. The heart rate can climb, the breath gets more shallow. These hormones of adrenaline and cortisol flood your system, and that prepares you to be ready to handle the threat. Or you can go into shutdown, and that's when the threat feels too big. Or when fight or flight isn't working, we go into avoidance. And that's freezing, fawning. You feel flat, numb, disconnected, and you're going through the motions, right? And remember that we are meant to move through all three of these states. And we are meant to mobilize and move and use that energy when we need it. But what we always want to do is to return to that zone of ventral vagal safety and connection, and in that zone of optimal performance. And that is where rest truly is. But when we don't rest, and when rest isn't built into that system, that pathway to get there gets harder and harder and harder to access. And this is something that we're going to remember throughout this whole entire series. Genuine rest is not just the absence of activity or activation. Genuine rest is a return to that ventral vagal state, and that's your nervous system coming home and allowing itself to feel truly at rest. And a lot of times we are not ever actually getting there. Or when we do have the opportunity to rest, our brain turns on because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like we have deserved it. It doesn't feel like we can truly rest because maybe our cell phone's going to go off at any moment with a call to come in. And that's the problem. Now, I've talked about this before in the podcast, but I wanted to bring it up again. So Christina Maslach helped develop the burnout scale. It's the Maslach Burnout Inventory. And this scale helps us see what burnout is. And this scale has 3 components. And the first is when we are burned out, we feel emotional exhaustion. So this is when we're empty, we're completely wrung out. And then burnout also shows that people often have depersonalization. So we start going numb to the people around us. We can become cynical, and it is a behavior of defense. And then the third part of the scale is that you have a reduced sense of personal accomplishment. So when you're burned out, something that you used to love, like caring for people, you just don't love anymore. And many physicians, the last time I looked, at least half of all physicians say that they have at least one or more of these qualities. And for nurses, it's even higher. Last time I looked, it was about 62% report feeling one or more of these. Now, this does not mean that these people are weak. These people did not choose the wrong profession. But more often than not, these people are living in a system that has normalized that we live in fight or flight or in shutdown. And this is just our normal mode of operation. This is just our normal mode of working, giving. And so that is what feels normal. And so when we have the opportunity to rest, or when we are off shift, our nervous system does not just shift into rest. Now, let's go a little bit deeper. For healthcare workers, there's an added layer. We often chose this work because we are caring people, right? We want to help other people. It brings us fulfillment to care for those, and we genuinely, deeply care. Now, sometimes that system has learned to use that against you. The guilt when you leave. Please stay. We have so many patients. They really need your help. The staffing office calls when you're off shift, when you're off duty, and you actually have that feeling that taking care of yourself is somehow taking away from your job and taking care of your patients. And this is where fulfillment kind of goes away. And I want you to realize that rest is not the absence of caring. Rest is not abandonment. It's not being selfish. And somehow in our brain, we need to correct that. So how can we rest, and how can we still care and say an intentional yes? I talked about that in our last podcast. And how can we actually get a full intentional rest when it's our time? Well, that's what this series is about. So let's talk about real rest and real recovery, because we need rest. It is what makes caring sustainable. We are a bucket and we need to be refilled, and you cannot give from an empty bucket, at least not truly, not very well, and not for very long. So let's talk briefly about what real recovery and rest actually is. And I want to give you 3 categories of genuine recovery, and I want to be clear that these are not the same as just passive resting. Passive resting could be scrolling, numbing out, eating junk food. It provides relief from a little bit of stimulation, but it does not send the cues of safety to our nervous system that it needs to actually move our nervous system into that ventral vagal state, or that zone of optimal resilience. Relief is not recovery, and I want that to be clear throughout this whole series. So the first category is physical recovery. This is sleep. It's like real sleep, protected sleep, sleeping soundly, sleeping enough, sleeping well. This is also movement done for joy, for regulation, not exercising because you have to, but doing something that you enjoy. This is nourishment that gives you care rather than packaged on the go. Your body's not a machine to be optimized, and your nervous system, when it's trying to keep you safe, it needs that physical care just in the same way that we need to water a garden. We need to give it what it needs. The second category of real rest is psychological recovery. This is a mental quiet, and this isn't just meditation, though that can be part of it. This is time without something to do, like time in nature, where your prefrontal cortex can take a break and relax from its constant executive functioning role. This is time for humor, time for lightness, because laughter, like real live laughter, is one of the fastest pathways back to our zone of optimal resilience, our ventral vagal state. When we can intentionally look for glimmers. Glimmers are micro moments of safety that communicate to our nervous system that we are safe. These send a signal personally to your nervous system that it's okay to relax and that the world is a safe place. The third category is social recovery. This might surprise you, maybe not. Connection is not always energizing for depleted people. In fact, a lot of high achievers say they need alone time to recover. And that may or may not be true. It depends on who you are. But there is a specific kind of connection that is deeply restorative. And this isn't transactional. Arthur Brooks calls this the difference between deal friends and real friends. Deal friends are people who need something from you, take something from you, more like a work type of relationship. Real friends is when you can actually have a conversation where you don't have to perform. A relationship where you are known and not just useful. Your nervous system can co-regulate with the regulated nervous system around you, which is exactly why spending time with calm, safe, attuned people can actually change your biology and help you rest. And here's a beautiful thing. Genuine recovery doesn't require a week off. It doesn't even require a vacation, but it does require intention. It requires micro moments distributed often throughout your day. 90 seconds here, 5 minutes there, 10 seconds over here, one cycle of box breathing, having real conversations, a moment where you actually are so grateful for something, or you love something, you're in awe, you're delighting in something. These aren't necessarily small things or big things, but what this does is when we break them into our day, these are building blocks of a nervous system that can stay regulated, connected, and wise, even in the hardest seasons of life. So today, I want you to do a few things. I want you to write down in one sentence, or maybe a few sentences, what your story or your perception that you were modeled, that you were handed down about work and about rest. And I want you to be really honest and particular. Not what you logically know to be true, but what you actually feel in your bones when you slow down and you think about it. What was demonstrated to you and what story did you create for yourself? And maybe it will help you to see, what have I passed on? I want you to ask yourself, does rest feel dangerous to me because of that story? And maybe why? So write it down, look at it, and then ask yourself, is this true? Or was this what I was taught? Was this just generational pattern coming down? Because when we can name, when we can question, that's the beginning of all of our nervous system to feel safe. This is when we are looking at our life like I was talking to a client today. It's like watching yourself from a snow globe. You're holding a snow globe, and inside the snow globe is your life or your ideas going around, and we are looking on it. And then I want you to think about the 3 ways, and we're going to go into these more, about recovery. So there's physical recovery, like true physical recovery, including sleeping and eating healthy, psychological recovery, a mental quiet, connection, laughter, and then social, which is also connection with real people, co-regulating with humans or pets around you, or even nature. And then just become aware of what your story is about your rest, your work. And yeah, thank you for being here today. I hope this episode resonated with you a little bit. And if you feel so inspired, please share it with a colleague, a friend, a coworker. This series will be continued and go into depth about a lot of this. And I'm excited to talk about it. So until next time, take care of yourself, and we'll talk soon. Every week, you're learning something new here on this podcast, and that is a powerful first step. But guess what? Information alone doesn't create transformation. True change happens when you start to think differently and shift the nervous system patterns that drive your behavior. As a coach and an emotional resiliency expert, that is the work I do. I love to walk alongside you, whether it's one-on-one, in a small group that you choose, or with your workplace team. I can help you retrain your brain and nervous system so that stress no longer runs the show. You'll find ways to connect with me in the show notes. Let's do this work together.